Man, I just do not have a transition for this.
Well, one animated uh, people with superpowers to another group of animated people with superpowers, I guess.
Speaking of people who are mistreated because of their power levels,
Yes.
solo leveling.
Yes. Yeah, we took in the first four episodes of this new series, which is, I guess, also either a manga or light novel series.
It's a Korean manhwa.
It's Korean. Okay. Um, and it's basically set in a world not unlike Magpie Wizard, where a bunch of portals start opening up and a bunch of like creatures come out and create these dungeons, and then all of a sudden, people started getting superhuman abilities, magical abilities.
Once I'm done with the lawsuits from George McDonald Fraser for stealing his Flashman idea, uh, uh, I'll be turning around and counter-suing solo leveling to make up for it.
Yes.
But yeah, but in all seriousness, so apparently this is kind of the popular new paradigm for a lot of isekai stuff. So like a lot of isekai or a lot of light novels in Japan start off on these fan websites, and then publishers snap up the rights to the ones that are really popular on there,
Yeah.
which partially explains why so many Japanese light novel have pretty amateur writing. Um, but this whole idea of like the fantasy world invading the real world and people like have going to dungeons to fight it. I wonder if solo leveling is the one that started it because it seems like this one was being read by everybody.
Mm, probably. Yeah.
Like somebody at work I was talking with about this show was kind of surprised that I hadn't been reading it.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah, but yeah. So this show asks the interesting question. Okay, it's like we always have the super powered people. What happens if your powers just kind of suck?
Yeah. Yeah, which is the case with Jinwoo,
Sung
Jin
Jinwoo.
Sung Jinwoo. Yeah, he so all of they're called so the people with powers are called hunters, and they're ranked like like a typical ranking system. You got S class and then A through E, and Jinho is an E rank, and not just any E rank. He's like the lowest of the low.
He is the very bottom of the scale, has
Yeah.
just enough power to be worth employing.
Yeah, which he finds difficult, and he has a of course the little tragic backstory. His mother is basically comatose.
Yeah, she's been
Uh,
poisoned by the magic that is flowing into the world.
yes, and she's suffering from what they call eternal sleep, and so he has to pay take on these jobs to pay her medical bills. Plus, his younger sister is in high school, about to go to college, and
Right.
has to figure out how to pay for that. And he's not making any real money doing his dungeon raids because he doesn't do much, so he doesn't get a whole lot of coin for it.
Right. And in this story, this it's very non-gamey to start with because basically it's like, okay, well, whatever magic you got, you got.
Yeah,
You got the potential to be the worst E rank person ever. Sucks to suck.
you're right. Yeah. And so he's part of. So the first two episodes, he's part of a raid on this, basically on a dungeon within a. There's a dungeon within a dungeon, and he's there
Right.
with. He's there with a friend of his who's a girl, and I can't remember her name, but she's a healer. Uh,
Yeah, it's interesting because I think she clearly likes him, and he
yeah,
just hasn't figured it out.
yeah. he does seem a bit clueless when it comes to the ladies liking him.
or for that matter, most things.
Oh yeah, most things, yeah. Uh,
Yeah, it's like first they clear out the normal sized dungeon, then they find a hole to another dungeon. And the thing is, like every dungeon, it's very interesting with all this like East Asian media, things like My Hero Academia uh, or One Punch Man. This kind of fits in the category where everything is categorized.
mhm.
Your powers are immediately ranked, and when a hole opens, we can just use magical sensors of some sort to gauge what threat level it is. So we can send in an appropriate party.
Right, yeah, and the other part of it too is that they all have all the dungeons have a boss, and then once they defeat the boss, they have like I think it's like 20 minutes before the dungeon disappears. So they got that time to loot the place and get out.
Right, and the loot they get, the monsters themselves, their bodies have these gems that produce magical energy that is basically free power.
Yeah. Which, yeah, they even talk about in the show trying to use that instead of using fossil fuels and coal and all the other things that we use as energy sources.
They also make the point that the monsters, when they invade our world from the portals, they are immune to conventional weapons, which is why you have to have people dressed like fantasy adventurers deal with these problems.
Correct. Yeah. Um, so the party that Jinwoo is with, they go into the second dungeon, and of course it's a trap.
Yes, and I gotta say, so this is like the back half of episode one, front half of episode two.
Mhm.
Uh, I don't usually like these shows where they just seem to go edgy boy for the sake of it,
Yeah.
but this was effective. You definitely felt the menace of them having to fight these enormous god statues.
Yeah, and they just all start getting picked off one by one in very gruesome fashion. Uh,
Yeah, like they make good use of the quiet moments between moments of terror to build to build that suspense.
yeah, yeah, and there was one character in there. As soon as he started talking about like, oh, I just had another kid, and I'm trying to get
Oh,
money for my family. I'm like, oh no, you did not just say that.
oh man, you never admit that.
Yeah, that's like that's the veteran cop. I'm 3 days from retirement.
Mendoza.
Yeah, and during the whole thing though, Jin Woo actually kind of figures out like how it works inside there, and
Right.
um, and
So you get
then
a very good sense that he's like because he hasn't isn't powerful, he's had to develop his cleverness, his situational awareness, his ability to sneak around. So
mhm.
he puts all that to good use to save the lives that he's manages to save.
Yes, but then he ends up getting just thrashed and ripped apart. But then right before he's about to die, he gets this like video game notification pop up in front of him and tells him, well, you're about to die. If you don't accept this or whatever, your heart's gonna stop. And he's like, oh, okay, I'll take it. And
Yeah, your heart will stop in 0.02 seconds.
yeah,
And so then this was the part of the show where I was like, okay, this is where it becomes like a video game, which I'm usually not a fan of. Like
hmm
my first time trying to read Shield Hero, I literally stopped and returned the book on Amazon as soon as I hit the section where I realized that the characters had heads up displays.
yeah,
Like I eventually got more used to it as I got more versed in isekai shows, but still,
yeah,
like that's still just like at my core. It's a turn off for me to video gamify things.
yeah. And I felt that way with the hidden dungeon only I can enter. Although that one's more of a harem fantasy than
What you mean
anything
with that
else.
vaguely suggestive title?
Yeah.
Um, but So what you find out is that now they did seem to kind of retcon something because they said, oh, you're always stuck with whatever level you have.
Hmm.
But then the agency goes, well, the only way you could have survived is if you had a rare second emergence or whatever they called it.
I think it was Awakening. Yeah.
Second awakening, that's it.
Yeah.
And then they measure him as like, nope, you are exactly the same. Sorry to waste your time.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then he starts getting these notifications. You must do these activities or pay a penalty.
Yeah, and it was like, yeah, so he's in the hospital bed, and it's telling him like, do 100 push-ups and 100 sit-ups and 100 squats and run for a kilometer, and he's like,
Run for 10 kilometers.
10 kilometers, yeah,
Basically, the One Punch Man workout routine.
yeah, and of course he doesn't do it, so then the penalty is he's getting chased around by a what was that? That was a giant,
Like a giant sand centipede or something.
yeah, yeah,
Basically, living in Dune for
yeah,
4 hours of trying to survive.
yeah. So then he starts doing all the daily exercises, and then he starts getting all these rewards from the game system, and then he goes into a dungeon inside a train station. Um,
And it is literally a hidden dungeon that only he can enter because he's
right.
part of this gamified system.
Yeah. And then he realizes all the training he's been doing, he can actually like fight low level goblins and uh,
And even higher level monsters at that.
yeah. And then he's beating wolves and yeah.
Yeah, and so I gotta say, I so this show, how to put it, my problem with a lot of isekai or gamified fantasy stuff is that it very quickly starts feeling like the characters are living in easy mode.
Yeah.
Now, it sounds like that may happen later from what the coworker was telling me,
Hmm.
but episode 4, he is still having to work hard for what he gets.
Yeah. Yeah, and he's in a was episode 4, was that when he goes into the level C dungeon with the, or is that episode 5?
Episode 4,
Episode
yeah,
4,
like
yeah, okay.
with the giant snake.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and so you have this new. So basically, episode 4. The reason we watched episode 4 instead of the 3 episode rule is that episode 4 or episode 3 ends with him like in the middle of this dungeon. And it's like, okay, we're not going to get a sense of how this show is without seeing how this dungeon resolves.
Right, yeah. And there's also another part in there where there's like a golem that's outside the dungeon, and then he has a broken piece of his sword, and he just throws it, and it knocks the
Yeah,
golem's barrier down.
insta kill.
Yeah.
And so now it's like the elements are he's leveling up because of this system that forces him to train and partake of these activities. You have his semi-girlfriend love interest who is traumatized by the horrors she saw in the first couple episodes, doesn't
Yeah.
know that he has this power.
Right.
No one knows that he has this power.
Yeah.
Uh, and it's kind of unclear where it's going to go from there. But I will say,
Mhm.
so first off, the animation was in part done by A1 Studios, who I recall 10 years ago kind of had the reputation of being the McDonald's of Japanese animation.
Yeah, yeah, they did like, yeah, they've done like SAO and
That's
what
your
else?
that's your Darling in the Franks. That was more Studio Trigger, but A1 was like funding them or something.
Okay.
Um, they did a lot of things that were like SAO in terms of like story quality and everything.
Yeah.
I think they also did Licorice Recoil if memory doesn't fail me.
Yeah.
But I will say this show itself has some real visual flair. I don't know, that might just be them copying it from the manga or manhwa.
Yeah. Yeah, no, the animation's really good. It's pretty fluid in places, especially in the fight scenes.
Yeah, the fight scenes really give you a nice sense of of movement and energy, and you can feel the danger, even though you kind of objectively know, okay, the main character isn't going to die in the third episode after he's just gotten his powers. Come on.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah.
But I would actually continue watching this, which I can't think of the last fantasy anime with a gamified structure I could say that of.
Yeah, yeah, same here. It's yeah, it's entertaining, and you definitely get a you definitely feel some sympathy for the protagonist and in his situation, and it's like, okay, well, this guy's he's been screwed over for a while, and now he's finally getting some power to
Right. You
do
definitely root for him.
yeah. Yeah, but and not real fan servicey. I noticed too. It's pretty
Yeah.
straightforward.
Yeah. The redhead girl is cute, but not in like a flashy way.
Right. Yeah. It's not like the hidden dungeon only I can enter. Bouncy, bouncy.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, yeah, it's actually, and also this might be I mean, so far it's the best manhwa I've seen turned into an anime, which that is not high praise between God of High School existing on levels of fast forward that X-Men '97 could only dream of towards the end.
Yeah.
Um, and then Tower of God existing at levels of time wasting that like you, nothing really happens until the last episode.
Yeah. Yeah. Jeez.
And then it's like it's a moment where you kind of really want a second season to happen, and it's apparently coming soon if it hasn't already.
Mm,
But still, it's like, oh, like
mm.
you were why did you tease us for so long with nothing?
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's like this one actually is like interesting from the start. So
Yeah.
good job.
Yes. It's on Crunchyroll, and anyone's interested in watching.
Yes, indeed.